Good afternoon. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this afternoon's zoning hearing. Today we are considering two requests in conjunction with a project known as Signature Storage Suites. It is an application to rezone property to the light industrial zoning district, and it is accompanied by a variance that would allow a single access drive to serve the site. All testimony and evidence that I accept during these hearings must be submitted under oath. Therefore, I will administer the oath to everyone in the room at one time before we begin. A few more remarks for those of you who are not familiar with the zoning process. The order of proceedings will be as follows. The applicant's representative, these are the planners that are hired to present the request. They will present the request on behalf of the developers of the site. They will explain how the request complies with the Lee County Land Use Plan and Land Development Code. These are essentially the land development regulations that govern development in unincorporated Lee County. At the conclusion of their presentation, the county planner who reviewed the application and prepared the staff report will make a presentation as well. The staff's recommendation in this case is one of approval for both the rezoning application and also the variance request. Following staff's presentation, I will open up the floor to members of the public. At that time, you may come to the podium one at a time and share with me your concerns regarding the property. I find oftentimes people are not completely in favor or opposed to a project, but they have very specific concerns. If you share them with us, you afford us the opportunity to answer questions and shed some light and clarify the things that you don't understand. Okay, will everyone please raise their right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place into the record this afternoon will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready to begin. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Stacy Ellis Hewitt with Banks Engineering. I do have the exhibits as outlined in the 48-hour notice.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
With me today, I also have Ted Treesh with TR Transportation Consultants. I've previously been accepted as an expert witness in land use and planning zoning matters, and I request to be accepted as such today.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. The applicant is Caves at Lake Torg, and the location of the property is 16261 and 16271 Pine Ridge Road in the Iona McGregor Planning District. The request is to rezone 13.72 acres from agricultural AG2 and light industrial IL to light industrial. And the associated variance is from Land Development Code section 10-291-3, which requires more than one ingress or egress for commercial or industrial development more than 10 acres to allow one access point in conjunction with the hybrid warehouse development. The request will be relocating and reconfiguring the existing access point approximately 41 feet to the north. This is the site location map. It does consist of 5 parcels on the east side of Pine Ridge Road, approximately 1,200 feet south of Kelly Road. The future land use for the property is industrial development with central urban across Pine Ridge to the west and urban community to the east. The zoning map for the site, the subject property is agricultural, and then the center parcel is already zoned light industrial, and the zoning resolution is attached to the staff report for that. We do have industrial IL to the north and to the south, as well as CG to the south, and some agricultural zoning where the old borrow pits are located. It's the aerial of the site, the existing uses on the site, and the staff report talks about the single-family residence that exists on the site. It was built in approximately 1961, and the accessory structure that was built in approximately 2019 that's located in this area, and the old borrow pits on the eastern portion of the property. Access to the site currently is provided through an old 1974 easement that's located on the property adjacent to the south, which is the one that is proposed to be relocated. The staff report does recommend approval, and the applicant's in agreement with the conditions as amended by the 48-hour notice, and I would like to incorporate the staff report in the 48-hour notice with attachments as part of my testimony.
Okay, so do I have just a revised codified list of the conditions at this point, or I do not?
I did realize I didn't give you that in the 48-hour notice.
The
so
opportunity for error is magnified if I have to codify, I've got to cobble together.
This slide 9, does have the
That's
condition.
up to date?
Yes,
Okay.
this is with the 48-hour notice revision.
I can rely on this?
Yes.
The only change really was to condition 2 that had some trip generation in it.
There was a modification to the square footage, I believe.
Correct. Okay, thank you. That's why I put that in there. It's the conditions basically tie it to the variant site plan and the development parameters, as well as the connection separation, which is being requested as part of an administrative deviation, and it also requires approval from Iona McGregor Fire District, which has already been obtained and will be submitted with the development order.
All right, because you have a companion DO that's underway.
Correct.
All right, so I want you to walk me through this site plan.
Okay, certainly, not at all. And there is, I do have a clarification, another clarification I noticed. The associated development order language is a little out of date, and it doesn't match the current site plan, and we're going to be amending that just as far as the amount of units. It had said, I believe, 88 units and 6 buildings. That was an old site plan before some comments had been received. The site has been reduced now to 70 units and 5 buildings.
So it was 88 and 6, now it's 70 and 5?
Correct. And that was just there used to be a building proposed up along the frontage, and this was actually 2 buildings, and the site has been reduced just in response to comments and some revisions to the site plan.
So these are single-story storage units?
Correct. This is if I can go back to the aerial for a moment. My clicker stopped. Oh, okay. Oops. This development here
Yes.
is island storage suites, and is the very similar project. That's what's being proposed here. This was an old hybrid warehouse development that was approved, and it's very similar to those existing.
All right, so let's go back to the site plan.
Yes. Clicker's having a delay. Oh, it's the site plan. That's what's making it. Okay.
So what makes this a hybrid warehouse?
The hybrid warehouse is, there was an ordinance, it's adopted but not codified, that defines the hybrid warehouse use and also has specific conditions that need to be tied to that. I do have that ordinance if you'd like me to submit that, just so
We
it
have members
has.
of the public here, so I want you to clarify what exactly the type of storage that contemplates.
Okay, it's a hybrid warehouse is storage units that have overhead doors as well as doors that open into the development, and they're each available for either ownership or rent. And associated with the storage, not only for dead storage, you can also have an option for occupiable space, where you can have a restroom or AC or a mezzanine that's placed for a second floor within the units, that you can have for doing hobbies or some accessory recreational uses associated with the case. A lot of times in the past, they've kind of been referred to as man caves or she shed kind of situations. But it has been since codified, and that's why they call it a hybrid. It's not, doesn't fall under the definition of a mini warehouse, because mini warehouse is just dead storage with overhead doors, and that's why they've come up with a definition that's codified in the code now for a hybrid warehouse.
And which allows for occupied space.
Correct. It allows you to store, and you can be there to work on your hobbies, or if you've got your car there, you can have associated uses that are specifically restricted by covenants that are required to allow no overnight parking. Let me pull the restrictions up if you don't mind, just so I don't miss anything there. You're allowed to have the storage of your personal property, such as automobiles, boats, recreational vehicles, furniture, and other possessions. You can do minor maintenance on your personal property, which doesn't create noise, vibration, glare, fumes, odors, or electric interference. Objectionable to the normal senses as measured from the property line. And you can do personal hobby and recreation activities within the units. Prohibited uses is you can't live there. There's no dwelling units allowed, no housing units, temporary living, and no overnight sleeping. You can't have any installation of stoves, cooktops, or ranges, or ovens. You can't operate a business, no manufacturing or construction, and no storage or use of hazardous material, and you cannot have a gun range in the units. You can't have open storage either, unless it's permitted and in the zoning district and located distinctly separate area, which isn't proposed on the site plan. There's no outdoor parking allowed, overnight outdoor parking, and you cannot use the outdoor areas for the uses that are allowed in the units. You can do any outdoor temporary events require a temporary special event permit. And there is a requirement that covenants be recorded before building permit that outlines these requirements and follows with the project.
And these units can be rented or owned like a condominium by the owner?
Correct. They can either be rented for rent or they can be condoed out. Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now the site plan, it does abut residential uses and the adjacent residential towards Pine Ridge, and there's a required type E buffer, which is 25 feet with an 8-foot wall or wall and berm combination, 5 trees and 30 shrubs per 100 linear feet, or wherever there's roads or drives within 125 feet of that. There's required either a 30-foot type F buffer or a wall located 20 feet from the property line, or a wall berm combination with 5 trees and 18 shrubs per 100 linear feet.
And that'll line that residential lot on the south and east side?
Correct. What happens is this, wherever the roads are, we will comply with either the 30-foot type F buffer or the wall a minimum 25 feet from the property in Land Development Code 10-416 D6. And wherever there's no roads and just the industrial development, will provide the type E buffer. To the east, we have also, there's a 31-foot right-of-way easement. And then across from that is Lee Plantation, and there's a 40-foot buffer common element tract that runs along there as well. And because of the 31-foot right-of-way, a 15-foot type D buffer is proposed in that location, except where we have this drive aisle within 125 feet. That will also comply with the 10-416 D6 buffering in that location.
Okay, so the right-of-way is how wide?
It's 31 feet.
31 feet plus there's 40 feet on that property, so a total setback from the trees planted on this property will be
Around 71 feet.
71 feet.
Correct. And to the agricultural zoning and industrial zoning, no buffers are required or proposed on the site. The existing access point, again, is, let me go to the next slide about the access.
So the vegetation that I see in this photograph has been removed, right?
That's correct.
I'm going to be doing my site visit tomorrow with other cases that I'm working on, doing them all tomorrow. So I just wanted to make sure I understood the staff report and the applicant's narrative that the aerials don't reflect the current condition of the
That's
property.
correct. The site has been cleared.
Okay.
Apologize, the clicker's giving me a...
And will this property be subject to the architectural design requirements for commercial in the land development code, or is it exempt because of the kind of use that it is?
Because it's industrial, I do not believe it's subject to the commercial site design requirements. The existing access is along this, it's located within the property south of us in an old 1974 easement, and it's only approximately 20 foot wide. It's asphalt and gravel, as you'll see when you make your site visit. The current access does not meet connection separation as it is, and the proposed access, we've got the minimum maximum 35-foot opening, but working with the fire department, we've expanded this with some striping where it'll be about approximately 40 feet entrance and 24-foot aisles to the north and south of the median, and the adequate turnaround is provided before the proposed gates. The access is being shifted approximately 41 foot to the north, and we do have a concurrent administrative deviation under review for the connection separations that 330 feet is required because Pine Ridge is a major collector in a future suburban area. But as stated, the existing access doesn't meet connection separations. And is my understanding that the review on that has been finished and is waiting on completion of this case. The concurrent applications, as stated, there's a concurrent development order of DOS 2023-00018 for the infill hybrid warehouse development. And again, now it's 70 units and 5 buildings, and that will be corrected on resubmittal with the development order. And the concurrent administrative deviation is ADD 2023-00094, and that's for access connection separation and also for solid waste recycling collection area. The request does comply with the required zoning findings found in the code, as stated in the staff report and the attachments. It's in compliance with policy 1.1.7 for the industrial development future land use category, as the request will provide one consistent industrial zoning category, and it'll also remove the inconsistent single-family home that's on the site and expand infill industrial development potential for the site. It meets objective 2.1, policy 2.1.1, as it does promote contiguous and compact infill development. It's within a future suburban area. It meets objective 2.2, policy 2.2.1 on development timing. It does propose a compatible development pattern, and there are adequate public facilities as outlined in the staff report as far as the frontage and access on Pine Ridge Road, Lee County Utilities has adequate capacity for water and sewer, and the fire, EMS, and the sheriff's office are all located just a little over a half a mile away from the site. We also did receive letters of approval for the access from Lee County Public Safety, Lee County Sheriff, and Iona McGregor Fire District, who all reviewed the site plan. And the sidewalks will be required to comply with the Land Development Code at the time of DO. It does comply with standards 4.1 and 4.1.2 on water and sewer. It also complies with policy 5.1.5 as the Land Development Code required buffers, setbacks, open space, and lighting standards will all provide adequate protection to the existing residential. It's consistent with Goal 7, policies 7.1.1, 7.1.2, 7.1.3, and 7.1.4 for the industrial land uses. And it also, these policies, when I was preparing my presentation, they weren't included in the narratives or the staff report, but most of the site is within the coastal high hazard area, and it does comply with Goal 101, policies 101.1.1, 101.3.2, and 101.3.5. The site is going through a concurrent South Florida Water Management District permit. We're very close to getting that approved, and there are no wetlands on the site. So it does limit development to uplands, and should a caretaker's residence, which isn't proposed at this time but is allowed by administrative amendment in the IL zoning district, should that happen in the future, it would be required to provide adequate mitigation. And also, it's another policy that I neglected to include was policies 125.1.2 and 126.1.4 on surface and groundwater. The South Florida Water Management District handbook states that issuance of the ERP ensures that surface and groundwater quality won't be adversely impacted. The request does meet the Land Development Code and other applicable county regulations, as it does qualify for the concurrent variance and the concurrent administrative deviations that are requested, and it does meet or exceed the light industrial IL dimensional requirements. It's also compatible with existing and planned uses in the surrounding area, and it will provide access sufficient to support the proposed development intensity. Access is sufficient for the light industrial zoning uses, and a traffic impact statement will be required for any DO and has been provided with the current DO that's under review. The concurrent variance does propose a low traffic generating use, and again, access approval has been obtained from the public safety, Iona McGregor, and the sheriff's office. The expected impacts on transportation facilities will be addressed by existing county regulations. The applicant's traffic impact statement and the infrastructure planning staff both agree that the project will not have a detrimental impact on roadways. It will not adversely affect environmentally critical or sensitive areas, as there are none existing on site. And the applicant will be required to demonstrate compliance with environmental codes at the time of development order. And again, the site will be served by adequate public services. It also complies with the variance findings in the code. There's existing access configuration and the limited property frontage and the undeveloped adjacent right-of-way to the east. All are inherent exceptional conditions that cause application of the code to create a hardship on the owner. These conditions were not a result of actions taken by the property owner, as they all date back to the '74 when that access easement was approved, and the property owner didn't buy the property until May 9th of 2022. The variance granted is the minimum variance that will relieve the unreasonable burden from the code, as it's a single relocated and reconfigured access. Granting of the variance will not be injurious to the neighborhood or detrimental to the public welfare. It's associated with a very low traffic generating use, and it relocates and reconfigures the existing access point, and the variance site plan does demonstrate adequate buffers and setbacks. The variance is consistent with the Lee plan, as it has no impact on the Lee plan consistency previously outlined. And it also does, since it's a variance from Chapter 10, it will not create an undue burden on essential public facilities. The existing access will be improved, and again, it's a low-traffic generating use. That does conclude my presentation, unless you have any questions.
Yes, I have a question. When I was going through the notebook of the staff report and all the attachments and applicant's narrative, I remember reading something that there are reuse water lines in the area. So the project will be required to connect to those lines for irrigation purposes. Is that correct?
I'm not sure on that. I do recall that the utilities availability letter claimed that reuse lines are an availability.
I did see
to the
that
site.
as well.
Whether the land development code requires it for irrigation or not, I'm not sure, but I can certainly
Well, the
find
Lee
that out.
plan says if you have the ability to connect, you're supposed to connect. So it's a Lee plan issue.
Okay.
Okay.
I just tossed that out there.
I will pass that on for sure, because I as well am not certain where the irrigation is proposed at this time. Lee plan.
It's not often that reuse
I know.
lines are available.
Exactly.
But you got the water treatment plant right there, so maybe
Yeah.
you're close enough that, and I know that the rates are usually a lot less than for potable water. You wouldn't use potable water for irrigation anyway. They probably do a well, but I think you must connect if it's available. You can check into that.
Yes, and I'm not sure exactly like how close they are when they state they're in the vicinity. So I'm sure that plays into it as well, as far as what the code requires, how close they are for connection. So, but I appreciate you bringing that up, and I will pass that
Well,
along.
you'll have to follow up on that letter from utilities.
Yes, will do.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
I'm ready
thank
for
you.
staff's presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, Adam Mendez. I'm a senior planner with the zoning section. I do have copies of the PowerPoint presentation I'd like to present you.
Thank you.
Stapled copy.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off by saying we're in total agreement with the applicant, and the presentation, as expected, was thorough, so I will try my best not to restate the obvious here, as we've all heard plenty of testimony as to where the staff and the applicant find themselves in respect to this case's consistency with the land development regulations. I'll start off with the surrounding land uses. Stacy touched on this, and I'll touch on it in broad and state the staff report does recognize that this area has been a it's developed in syncrasy with industrial and manufactured uses since the 80s. So there's been not necessarily a challenge or a war between the two, but they've kind of just coexisted and developed along this corridor, and I think that would reflect the selection on the land use planning land use category in 1984. So the future land use category that is industrial development is about 73 acres. It's about a 1/4 mile deep off of Pine Ridge Road, and it's about a 1/2 mile, I'd say, wide or along the frontage of Pine Ridge Road. As Stacy noted, there is a pocket of IL zoning that's currently on the property, and the request is to unify that zoning across the entire boundary of the property, 13.72 acres, I believe. Looking back at some of the development trends out here, especially in the mid-'80s, you can see in 84, it looks like Lee Plantation is getting off the ground. Lee Plantation was originally approved with a 1983 development order. This is right towing the line of the comp plan adoption in 84. It does meet density, so it's not an 8636 approved park with its urban community future land use, and it's roughly 33 acres. It's within the density requirements. It met the zoning requirements at that time for MH2. These are all fee simple lots, I believe.
It is one of those
It's not 8636 approved. It meets density for the project, so they didn't have to divest the
So
units.
it was already underway in the mid-'80s.
That's right. 83 was where it started. The zoning actions happened in the 70s and early 80s, but it didn't come in for a DO until 83. And you can see in these aerials, 84, 86, you can start seeing it take off.
And their access to the county road network is,
It's via this private road right here, which now Signature Storage Suites benefits from as well, as you'll see in, if I have another aerial right here. Old South Way. And there is some plans for some additional residential units that are occurring here via an old planned development. It's going to have their primary access off of, I believe, Summerlin Road. Yeah, so there's more residential. You'll see that there's some construction occurring back here. It was meant for additional phases of Lee Plantation. Phase 1 occurred. They developed amenities, as we just heard, for a much larger park. They have a very large park and clubhouse that's kind of oversized. The developer, no one's complaining, right? And, the developer bellied up and sold off the other phases, and then those were rezoned into a planned development with again primary access off of Summerlin Road. And right now, because there's a shortage of 6-foot culverts to put in along Summerlin Road, they're using actually the park's Old South Way for access for construction right now.
okay. So what project is that?
Do you know the project name off the top? Sunset Falls? Oh, I can confirm that, but it's a PD, residential uses only. I will back into the variance. I'll discuss that a little more, and I want to point out staff's findings in reaching the standard for a variance, as we know that that's a hard standard to meet. And in this case, staff does agree with the applicant in that its limited frontage itself is an inherent exceptional condition. And when I say limited frontage, I mean viable or feasible frontage. As you know, there is a 31-foot unnamed right-of-way tract that separates I'd say the urban community from the industrial development future land use categories. And the Land Development Code has minimum right-of-way width specifications, pavement, things of that nature that would require many deviations in order for them to develop. And as my professional opinion also, the development or cramming in a right-of-way in a 31-foot tract would certainly be incompatible and probably raise concerns between these neighboring properties.
If they use that, does it continue all the way down to Summerlin? What would be their access?
So it goes up to Kelly Road.
Oh, it does?
Yes, it goes up to Kelly Road. That's probably would be the path of least resistance if it was absolutely necessary. But it also does go past Old South Way, and I believe it does go all the way down to Summerlin. But, you know, through lots of wetlands and areas that have to be culverted. So there's an economic element to variances we can consider, provided it's not the only hardship. So we're considering that certainly with respect to this project, especially when we consider the other criteria that we have to reflect, and that's, is this a minimum variance? And so looking at this site plan, what we're really asking for is, if this variance is denied, and I went over lots of different scenarios, in the event, I wouldn't say denied, but in the event a variance wasn't granted and 13.72 acres was approved, a development order could show no greater than 10 acres of development area, leaving about 3.7 acres off the table for development. In this plan, we're developing the entire site with a low trip generating use we know as a hybrid warehouse use. So it's tied to a site plan that not only commits the 3.7 acres, which is tripping it to require another access to a low trip generating use, but the entire property is being tied to this low trip generating use. If for some reason this project doesn't move forward, the 10 acres or less could only be developed as some sort of light industrial scheme under the permitted uses and property development regulations. So we believe that it is a minimal variance based on the low-intensity use that's being proposed. Staff was in receipt of this 48-hour letter, as Stacy hit on. We're in agreement with the revision on the conditions, eliminating the very specific IT trip generation figures used. Stacy makes a good point in that these figures could change from time to time. ITE could come out and absolutely identify hybrid warehouse as a very specific use and have a slightly different trip generation for it, and that would cause problems in the future. So instead, relying on the square footage and the actual use is, we believe, to be an appropriate compromise in ensuring that the intensity of this project is not understated.
All right, and you're satisfied with the proposed wording of the 5 conditions and?
Yes, yes, Madam Hearing Examiner. So with that, I will conclude to say that, as you know, the staff recommendation states that the findings for not only the conventional rezoning isolated from the variance are met, but that the standards for the variance and the departure to allow one access instead of more than one ingress and egress is sufficient, and that they've met that bar. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, comments.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
don't have any questions.
Okay.
I'm ready for public input. I'm going to call your names one at a time. If you wish to speak on the record, please come to the podium. If you don't, just say that you're just here to observe, and you will receive, if you provided your email, you'll receive a copy of my final decision in this case. The first person I have here is Lori Tallarico? No, you don't wish to speak? Okay. And then Preston Becker. Please come to the podium. Thank you for coming today.
Good afternoon. My name is Preston Becker. My associate is Laurie Tallarico. We represent the Board of Directors for Lee Plantation. And we just wanted to come up and endorse the signature storage units because he has put in the previous storage units next to us. And he's been a fantastic neighbor. Very easy to get along with, very willing to take the extra step to make sure we stay good neighbors. So that's.
All right, thank you very much for coming.
Okay, thank you.
All right, unless there's any concluding remarks, I don't think any are necessary. I'll close the record. I will prepare a final decision. I am the final decision maker on conventional zoning applications and also on variances, so I hope to issue something within the next 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.